Ravinder has served as Executive Director of the Sikh Research Institute and is currently on its Board of Directors. He is also on the editorial board of Khoj Kurbani, an online crowdsourcing platform that aims to provide Sikhs with educational resources. He moderates a weekly online discussion on Gurbani and Gurmat. Since 1997, he has lived in Westerville, Ohio, with his wife Harjeet and his daughter Simran. We are looking forward to your talk, and the title of the talk is Applying the Message of Sikhi to Ourselves. Ravinder Singh Taneja.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. The old saw about flattering introductions, when someone heard an introduction and said, after this kind of introduction, gee, I really want to hear myself. But that's not the case. And just a correction, I'm not on the board of directors of Sikhi. I was, not anymore, but I continue to work with whoever will work with me. So, and as long as the focus is Gurbani, I'm on. So thank you very much. I want to thank the sponsors for inviting me. And thank you, Secretary, for the indulgence. This really is an indulgence. My goal today really is not to deliver a lecture, although I'd love to, but that's not the goal. What I want to do today is I want to share with you some ideas around a project that a few of us have launched. And some of my partners I can see here, Ekul Karji and Eileen Alden here. We belong to this Sikh Vichar group that meets every Wednesday, and this whole idea has come out of those conversations. But before I get there, I also want to indulge in some introspection. And the reason I want to do some introspection is primarily because I want to hold a mirror up to ourselves. Because, the title of this conference was, how do we apply, the universal timeless message? It really confused me, for one thing. And my first reaction was, how about we look in the mirror first before we apply it elsewhere? Because I think we have a lot of preparation and a lot of homework to do ourselves, which is why I want to sort of engage in a little bit of introspection, just to place us where we are, and then we'll get on to the project. So with that, these are the broad categories that I'll be following. Locating Sikhs, a very important subject for me, as you will see, in part because it affects me personally, and it affects a lot of you. So I want to talk very quickly through this. To me, Guru Nanak's revolution, which was a revolution, signified by, there is a Savaiya of a part that I can't quite remember the exact quote, but it says something to the effect that Guru Nanak forced the Ganges upstream. I mean, the Ganga being symbolic of the Indian philosophical systems, in that he actually created a parallel system. And there is also another, I think from the Savaiyas again, that says that he actually struck a coin, Marya Sikha Jagatij, sovereignty, a new philosophical system, empowered, and by Gurdas, of course, Mititu Jagjanamaya. So, we start off with this paradigm shift in Indian thought that comes with Guru Nanak. We have Guru Arjan Dev Ji's project, which I see as a pluralism project, trying to create a society, a diverse society, and then Guru Gobind Singh's Khalsa. But to my mind, this process got lost somewhere. I believe that there's still work that needs to be done, and we are the flag bearers of this message. And so it is incumbent upon us to carry this message through. Every generation of Sikhs has to do that. We happen to be privileged. We are the flag bearers, standing bearers, Chadavardar of this message. So we have to carry it forward. But what has happened is, I want to get to the colonization part. I think somewhere along the way, we have become somewhat removed from the real message. What I mean by that is, we've had a colonial past, and while we may not recognize it, sheer physical subjugation is not colonizing. There's a colonizing of the mind that goes on. And so what I'm trying to say here is that Sikhs have a double whammy. I mean, there is right now a colonization that goes on because we are surrounded in India by a larger dominant culture. We had the English colonize us, and we are a minority wherever we live, which means that we are always adapting, adjusting to a dominant culture. Not that being a minority matters, I mean, it doesn't matter. I think what matters is that we recognize this, and that we recognize consciously where we stand vis-a-vis these dominant cultures, so that we can have a better way of dealing with them. Because what this does is, the way I see it is, it's created a loss for us. And by that I mean, we have lost the sense of our language, Punjabi and Gurmukhi script. The irony of me standing up here speaking to you in English instead of Punjabi is not lost on me. But this is something we have to be conscious of. We are, a lot of us, if not all, products of a Macaulian system of education. And I'm sure I can't get into that in any detail, but the fact is that the British interpreted Sikhi and other aspects of Indian life and Hinduism and handed that to us. My belief is that we as a community, as a Panth, have not quite gotten over that condition. That colonization still fetters our minds in ways that we may not be conscious of. But it is visible in our, let's say, attitudes, in our behaviors. English has become a language of exclusion. It's become a caste system within the Indian community. I mean, if you speak English, you're somehow better. That happens even now, even today. If you go to India, for instance, people are dashing to get an English education, and there are now, you have categories. So the point I want to make is, we are losing our language. We are losing Gurbani, looking at handed down, authorized interpretations. We are out of that hole yet. We are very much in there. So what does that do? What that does is, our knowledge of Punjabi, our knowledge of English is perfunctory. It's at best transactional. Na sanu Punjabi aandi, na sanu Angrezi aandi. And because try talking to someone in Punjabi beyond the usual transactional Punjabi or a few jokes. Try to express a literary idea or a concept. Won't happen. Try doing the same thing in English. Most of us will have problems doing that, right? And of course, trying to translate Gurbani into English, I think, at some level, is just distortion, because there just aren't those terms that are specific to Gurbani. So that's the point. My point here is, we are standing at a position of disadvantage, perhaps of our own making, perhaps not of our own making, that doesn't matter. But can you keep track of time for me, because I tend to ramble on a little. I want to get to the project. But I had to set this context so that you could get a feel for where I'm coming from. I feel this intensely because I am a product, like you, of a Macaulian education, and I have this double consciousness about me. Like a lot of us, a lot of the Sikhs I know, who happen to have the same background, have this double consciousness. And so the question is, how do I really turn this into an advantage? Because it can be turned into an advantage, having this double consciousness, you see? So that's the issue. Now that we've located the Sikhs and our problems, I also want to touch very quickly on the world as it exists today. we talk about the clash of civilizations, ideological conflict, economic and political exploitation, corruption. Point is, the world today is not very different from the time of Guru Nanak. Because when you read, the times then, you have the same kind of stuff going on, right? Corruption, politics, the leaders, and so on. So the world isn't any different, except that now colonization is returning, to my mind, in the form of globalization. Because globalization loves uniformity. And the nation states that we live in love uniformity. So that's another layer, that we who are a minority, are diverse, have an identity, because what this does is it puts pressure on our identity formation. And you know the result, right? People are running away from their identity, and the result is confusion. So that's where we are kind of standing. We have a very deep sense of our own identity right now. However, I think the time is also right now for the paradigm that Baba Pacha, as I love to call him, has given us, with the paradigm of ik. Because as I talked about this paradigm shift, he didn't go out, we make a reformer out of him, or people make a reformer out of him. I will tell you that he actually set a whole parallel structure in place. He just, he wasn't reforming anything. So the paradigm that he's given us is finding more and more acceptance in even the secular world, even they don't know it, because I know that I'm very interested in leadership models, and one of the things that I'm always questioning myself, as well as my fellow Sikh brothers and sisters, where is our model? Where is the Sikhi model of leadership? Why are we always running towards all of these other diverse, there is a model right here. We need to develop it. And the reason we don't develop this is because we are accepting things. We are not good at creating knowledge creation, meaning creation, because we do not have mastery of our own language, we don't have mastery of another language. So we don't have this going on. But now is the time to look at this Mool Mantra, which to me is a paradigm shift. It is a spiritual map, it is a moral compass, everything rolled into one. And as I will show you, it is the basis for a Sikh leadership model. So here's the background from where I'm coming. And now, the Coach Gurbani project. I've called it Recovering Sikhi, because I think at some level we need to recover some of our identity, our language, our sense of who we are. I kind of like this little cartoon because it says, I'll give you a non-duality hot dog, $5, make you one with everything on it. I just thought it was a contrast to the equal car, non-duality. But here is, again, this quote that I paraphrased. I got it from somebody called Robert Ravinder, who was writing something about leadership. But I liked what he said, so I took a little bit, but I paraphrased it. How do we fill the world with contemporary sages and kick-ass saints, gurus? How do we do that? Who are as adept at surrendering themselves to the silence, hukum, as they are at innovating initiatives of breathtaking power. In other words, how do you create a leadership model that is at a different place in terms of their inner awareness and are linked to their outer actions? That, in sum, is the goal of this project that we are trying to launch. It's kind of in the ideation phase. So I've used this model before, and I'm using it again because I find this to be an easy way to explain the Sikhi development model. I kind of took it from some business writings, but it helps me explain to myself. If I'm a Sikh, what do I have to do? So as I say here, personal awareness is a prerequisite model. So at an individual level, you have to change your inner awareness. So Sikhi Vasta, it's pretty simple. How many? You have to get to hukum. There is a symbiotic relationship. You have one, you don't have the other. You have the other, you don't have one. So there is a sort of dance that is going on, it seems to me. And the balancing act is Naam below. So if you want to get from Haume to Hukam, you can't go straight. You have to come down through Naam. So this is just a way to illustrate that process. Not that it literally happens that way. So this is the journey that the project conceives as the journey of Sikh youth. How do we catch our young children and begin to put them through this journey? The idea is to make Gurbani interesting enough to them so that they are grabbed by it. Not, you just can't hammer them with it. Make it interesting to them so that they get on this journey. So that, their jigyasa, their sense of curiosity of awe is awakened. At the end, I've got the word live here. That is the basis for that inner awareness, for that leadership. That is what we want to give them. And then once they get that, they travel down this. Atam ki rehat means I usually go to Japji's 38 stanza and I say, look, here's the template for you. This is what you should do. It's telling you there. Once they begin to get to Naam, or at least begin to reach this point, which is the intersection of the timeless and the time, I think Hukam then becomes evident to this person. He becomes inspired. He will just be so inspired, he will be in the service of a larger power. So, this is kind of very quickly the model that we want to use. Now, how does all got started? Quite simply, at the Gurdwara, I witnessed, at least in Columbus, there's 40 or 50 kids ranging from ages 6 to 18. A lot of these children are recent arrivals from India. When I say recent, I mean a couple of years. Have parents, by and large, who don't know the language, don't know English at all, don't know the system, don't have the time because they're working 2 jobs in factories to actually supervise or even help their children. Okay, so they're on their own. The kids are on their own. Some are doing better than others, but the fact is, so I said, why couldn't the community become a family to these children? Why don't we make them our responsibility? So you take a kid, so this is what I was thinking. So you take a kid who's 6 to 8. How do we infiltrate into his mind using the technology that's available to us today? And give him a daily dose of Gurbani, let's say not to exceed 15 minutes. And blend it in with his homework. So imagine this. I know for a fact that most Sikh homes, the evening, if you have children, they're usually doing their homework. The mother may or may not be there, the father, some parents is usually there, but they do their homework in the evenings, so I'm just visualizing this. And I'm saying, they usually have an iPad or some tablet. How can we push out little pellets of Sikhi that are wrapped and packaged in such a way that they begin to get interested? You see, how do we catch that? Because Khalsa schools, wonderful. Whatever's going on is great. But Khalsa schools meet once a week. I went to a Khalsa school in Singapore when I was a kid and I hated it because I had to do Udayara. And then I forgot about it. But the fact is that my conviction is that unless you catch them young, unless you give them the spell of Gurbani daily, a daily dose, they're not going to be soaked in Gurbani. Yeah, you can read English translations and get the message, and then you go out. And so what happens is that we unconsciously think we are talking Sikhi, whereas we are not. We're just taking broad ideas around us that seem to be Sikhi in some ways. General ideas on rights and so on. But I feel that if we could do this, if we could do this on a daily basis and not be limited in our scope. We have online portals, we have schools and so on, it's all very limited. I want to be able to push out, am I running out of time here? Oh, okay, I still have time? Okay. So you get the picture. The idea originally was that let's create a framework that would include coaching, tutoring, and mentoring. And in there, you slip in Gurbani. But then once we talked about it, it just appeared to be too much to sort of chew off. So we said, let's do Gurbani. Gurbani to me is central. I mean, the point is, if you look at your lives, and I include myself in that, Gurbani is like, Baki kaam ho gaye the, then yes, to Gurbani. I mean, even in our personal lives, we have to ask ourselves. I mean, I love this phrase that someone once said to me. He said, you know what, we are just Matha Teku Sikhs. That's all we are. We've been doing the same thing for 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, and that's about it. So even we are not, that serious about Sikhi. I would say that to everyone here and to myself. Sikhi is not central. It is not the fulcrum around which our life rotates. So when you have a process like this, guess what happens? Even the parent has to get involved because they have to sit down with their child and spend 15 minutes. So this then becomes a daily process. So that is the project. We have had some meetings. So, here's the interesting thing. When we started talking about this, not only was Ekunkar Kaur, and Eileen was here actually, by the way, she's created a prototype of the alphabet. She started, so here's the kind of things we are thinking. We're saying, okay, so if you want to create an alphabet, we don't want the usual Urayaras that are out there. Why not start with Guru Nanak's Patti? But that starts with a Sasa. So Eileen kind of worked on Sasa. This is a prototype. But these are some of the things that we are thinking. And out here, what I'm suggesting is that if we can create this process, and the way we would do it is we would run a little pilot, let us say, 5 cities. I know people in Brisbane are interested, people in Columbus, people in Boston, people in Chicago are committed to getting 5 families, at least, to just sort of play along and say, let's see how this goes. And you then get, so 5 times 5 is 25 families. My point is, if you do this, and you have 25 families starting it, others will join, this becomes a process that will just continue on, well beyond our time. They were talking about 500 years. I think that is the way to relink and rekindle Sikhi. It has to be a daily engagement 24/7. There's just no 2 ways about it. Everything else should flow from that, not the other way around. So this will help, parents will get involved, technology will get involved, and look at some of the things that are listed here. There'll be some standardization, but more importantly, if we are going to create these packages, we'll have to do some work. So the idea was that this was an excellent way of creating a new interpretation maybe of Guru Granth Sahib, assisting with inputs from people who are interested in Sikhs, kind of a crowdsourcing technique. But it would force you to then think in terms of literary production. That'll have to happen. It will then, and from there on, media. You'd start thinking about media. You might start thinking about think tanks. But think about this. Let's say, here is an example of a successful child, right, who does this. I want to go here. So, he moves from Haume to Hukam. So this is really a journey from being a Manmo, Haume being Manmo. When you're living in Hukam, you're a Gurmukh. Haume is your ecosystem, this is your ecosystem. If you even just have a handful of children who are steeped in Gurbani, and this kid is now 18 years old, he's received some of this mentoring and some of this coaching. By the way, I think we need adult mentors in the community as well, because it requires certain skills, and I think we are deficient. We don't have enough mentors. So this process will also create mentors in the community itself. They'll have to learn to be mentors. But imagine what they could do. Even if we had 5 kids coming out, they could change the world. They could absolutely change the world. That, I think, is the way that we go and apply the message of Sikhi. Is first to sort of imbibe it ourselves. This is a long-term process. This is not a silver bullet. It's not a short fix. It requires a tremendous amount of work, but it requires the community. So I'm presenting it to you just so that I can hear whether it's a pie in the sky or whether it's just a fantasy or whether it's worth doing. So with that, Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.
Bole so nihal. Sat Sri Akal.
If you have any questions, please do send them to me. I have a question, Raji. In the beginning part of your talk, you said we are getting colonized by globalization, sort of implying that we should reject globalization. To me, that appears contrary to the principle of Sikhi, because Guru Nanak himself teach globalization,
Yes.
saying Awal Allah Guru Paya, and then embracing everyone.
Absolutely.
So can you comment on?
Well, I think I didn't mean to imply that we should reject globalization. What I was suggesting was that we should be conscious of some of the pressures of globalization on our sense of ourselves. Because, you know, in some ways, there is a hegemony, a cultural hegemony at work with globalization. And it should not come at the cost of our own cultural formation. So if Guru Nanak was certainly global in his outlook, he was also very diverse. So all I'm saying is that we ought to protect our diversity within this pressure of becoming uniform.
Anybody else has a question?
Everyone got it.
Thank you very much, and wish you best with your project.